The ancient Egyptians were one of the most advanced civilizations of their time, and they are famous for many things, from their pyramids to their pharaohs. But who were the pharaohs? Throughout history, there have been many powerful women, but few have inspired such fear and respect as Cleopatra. She was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. Although she was born in Alexandria, Egypt, Cleopatra didn't actually speak a word of Egyptian. Instead, she spoke Greek, and her mother tongue was actually Syrian. This is because by the time Cleopatra was born, Egypt had been ruled by Greek-speaking people from the Ptolemaic dynasty for about 300 years. The Ptolemies were a dynasty descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals, and they ruled Egypt after Alexander conquered it in 332 BC, until Cleopatra's son Caesarion was deposed in 30 BC. So although Cleopatra was the last pharaoh of Egypt, she wasn't actually Egyptian. Instead, she was Macedonian. Cleopatra began ruling Egypt at age 14 after her father, King Ptolemy XII, died. However, she wasn't the only person with a claim to the throne. Her brother and lover, Ptolemy XIII, also wanted to rule, and the two wound up co-ruling together until Cleopatra had him assassinated. And she didn't stop there. She went on to marry and then kill 2 Roman leaders in order to maintain control of her kingdom. The first was Pompey the Great. He had sided with Cleopatra's brother during their power struggle, and he fled to Egypt after being defeated by Caesar in Rome. However, the relationship between Cleopatra and Pompey quickly soured. When Pompey attempted to seize control of the Egyptian treasury, Cleopatra turned him over to the mob, who chopped his head off and threw it into the sea. The second man that Cleopatra killed was Mark Antony. He had become the ruler of the Eastern Roman provinces after defeating Octavian in a civil war. However, Antony had given too much land to Cleopatra and her children, which made Octavian very angry. In 32 BC, Octavian declared war on Egypt and defeated Antony and Cleopatra's navies at the Battle of Actium. Realizing that they couldn't defeat Octavian, Cleopatra and Antony both took their own lives. Cleopatra reportedly held an asp, a type of venomous snake, in her arms when she died. Cleopatra isn't the only famous female pharaoh. One of the earliest female rulers of Egypt was Hatshepsut, who reigned from 1478 to 1458 BCE. During her reign, she had several building projects completed, including a mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari and a temple complex at Karnak. In addition to this, she sent expeditions to the land of Punt, modern-day Somalia, and to the Middle East. However, some of her successors erased her name and image from historical records, possibly because she broke with tradition and presented herself as a male pharaoh instead of a female one. One of the most famous female rulers in Egyptian history was Nefertiti, the wife of Akhenaten. She may be best known for her beautiful bust, which is now in Berlin. However, recent discoveries have revealed that she later broke with her husband and moved to Thebes, where she became a high priestess. But what about the male pharaohs? There were plenty of powerful men throughout Egyptian history, but perhaps the most famous was Akhenaten. He changed the religion of Egypt from polytheism to monotheism, worshipping a single sun god named Aten. He also built a new capital city called Akhetaten, but after his death, the city was abandoned, and his successor returned Egypt to its old religion. Another famous pharaoh was Thutmose III. He was the stepson and successor to Hatshepsut, and he is considered by many to be the greatest pharaoh of Egypt. During his reign, he waged military campaigns throughout the Middle East, conquering more territory than any other pharaoh before or after him. Ramses II was another great warrior king. He fought against the Hittites and the Libyans, and he even invaded the Levant in modern-day Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon. He was also responsible for building many temples and monuments, including the Ramesseum and Abu Simbel. Perhaps the most infamous female pharaoh was Isabella I of Egypt. She was the Queen of Egypt from 1301 to 1305 AD. During her reign, she engaged in a series of conflicts with the Mamluk Sultanate and the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem. She was also responsible for the construction of several mosques and madrasas, or Islamic schools. So these were just a few of the many powerful pharaohs of ancient Egypt. What did these leaders have in common? Well, first of all, they were all considered to be divine rulers. They weren't seen as having the same status as regular people, and they were believed to have been chosen by the gods to lead their people. This belief in the divine right of kings was one of the foundations of the pharaoh's power. It gave them the authority to make laws and to collect taxes, and it also gave them the right to be worshipped like gods. Of course, this wasn't always easy. There were times when the pharaohs had to fight to maintain their power, as when Cleopatra fought Octavian for control of Egypt. But overall, the pharaohs were considered to be the rightful leaders of Egypt, and their power was based on their connection to the divine. Another thing that the pharaohs had in common was their wealth. They were some of the richest people in the world, and they used their wealth to build impressive monuments like the pyramids and the temples. They also used it to build armies and to wage war against their enemies. The pharaohs' wealth came from the taxes that they collected from their subjects, as well as from the riches that they acquired through war and conquest. Some of the pharaohs were more interested in acquiring wealth than others, but all of them were very rich. Finally, the pharaohs of ancient Egypt were some of the most powerful people in the ancient world. They ruled over a vast empire that stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the Nubian desert. They controlled important trade routes, and they had large armies that were capable of winning wars against powerful enemies. The pharaoh's power was absolute. They were considered to be the highest authority in Egypt, and they were not accountable to anyone. Of course, there were times when the pharaohs had to share power with other members of the royal family, as when Cleopatra shared power with her brother. But overall, the pharaohs were all powerful rulers who were feared and respected throughout the ancient world. Unfortunately, the power of the pharaohs would eventually come to an end. In 30 BC, when Egypt was conquered by Rome, Cleopatra's son Caesarion was deposed, and Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. The last native Egyptian ruler, Cleopatra, had died 200 years earlier, and her descendants had either been killed or had fled to other parts of the empire. From this point forward, the rulers of Egypt would be appointed by the Roman emperors, and the era of the pharaohs would come to an end. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the like button. We hope you learned something new, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.